Hey everyone, Thomas from Bricks here. In today's video, I want to show you an extremely powerful new way to use the query loop builder in Bricks, and that is the ability to consume and render data from an external API. So up until Bricks 2.1, you were only able to query data from within your own database. So even though you could query posts, terms, and users, there was no way to actually retrieve data from another external source. That's no longer a limitation in Bricks 2.1. We now have a new query type called API, which lets us retrieve data from any external API. And of course, there are a million of different APIs that you could consume. The two examples that I prepared for this video, the first one is going to be a call to another WordPress website using the REST API. This is going to be our very own bricksbuilder.io. And the second one is using this public API here from dummyjson.com, where you can see we have a lot of recipes here. Both of them are using also the pagination element with the pagination setup within our API settings. We're going to jump into the builder now, so have a look how everything is configured so you can start using this new powerful feature on your own Brick sites going forward. All right, so within the builder here, we're just going to select straight away our first query, which is the WordPress REST API to bricksbuilder.io. And you can see the query loop has been enabled, and the query itself is showing us this API icon. That's also new, so you know immediately that this query is using the API type. So you can see here under type, we now have posts, terms, users, and now API already selected. And in order to access the settings, because we need to tell Bricks what do we actually want to query, right? We can just click on this API settings button. And then we see our pop-up here where we can configure everything and we can see what we actually query. And then we can use dynamic data tags, custom dynamic data tags to render whatever data we need from the API response within our query. So the column on the left-hand side is where we do all of our configuration. And on the right-hand side, we can see the response and we can get the dynamic data tags, or we can also save custom dynamic data tags in order to use within the query loop. Let's start at the very top. First of all, this is an experimental feature. So if you discover any bugs, definitely let us know via email or the forum. Query filters and components are not supported at this point in time when you use the API query type, so just that you know about that. And if you want to access the Academy article, you can just click on Learn More, especially in terms of pagination. You can see examples there as well. But of course, we're also going to explain the pagination down here as well. Okay, let's start at the very top with the API request. We can give it a name. This isn't optional. This is just for internal use here. So you can see that when you open up the query control, it's not going to be used anywhere on the front end. But yeah, you can provide a descriptive name here. So everyone who's maybe used within the builder knows exactly what this API is retrieving. The full URL of whatever API endpoint you want to hit, you need to provide it here. In our case, this is the REST API endpoint for bricksbuilder.io for the pages post type. Now URL method, HTTP methods, we have get and post. The default is a get call. Depending on the API that you're trying to consume, that might be post as well. Definitely make sure to consult the documentation of whatever API you're trying to consume. Authorization is not required for our public REST API endpoint here, but if you need to authorize that call through an API key, a bearer token, or basic auth, you can set it up right here. You can define the headers that you want to send with this API call. The defaults are going to be content type set to application JSON, and the user agent is set to Bricks Builder, and then the current version. If you want to somehow, need to allow the calls to only Bricks specific API calls, you can do that maybe by setting another custom user agent or whatever header you want to provide, right? You can just click here if you want to override the headers and then specify your data accordingly. URL parameters you can add here within this repeater. You could just append them as well to the URL directly, right? This is maybe a bit more readable. So what we've set up here in this case is the per_page with a value set to 3. So what's this going to do for the WordPress REST API? It's going to tell that we just want to retrieve 3 results per page. And you can see also on the front end here, we have 3 pages. Again, go to the second page, we have another 3 pages, and so on. For the API response, we can also define the response path. So basically what we expect here for the API response, this needs to be an array that we can loop over, right? Otherwise the query loop is not going to work. So if you have an API response where the actual data set that you want to loop over is nested, we need to provide a response path here. We're going to have a look at this in our second example, but for the first one, it's not required. That's why it's empty here. Cache duration by default is set to 5 minutes or 300 seconds. If you want to disable caching, you can just set this to 0. Simple as that. And if your API endpoint provides pagination support, you can enable has pagination. You will see a bunch of options here. If we disable it, right, nothing shows. If I enable it, I can, and I have to define all of those settings here. Where's the pagination parameter located, right? If it's in the URL parameter, which it is in our case for the WordPress REST API, if it's in the header, or if it's in the request body. I'm just briefly going over this because you can read all of this in the Academy article. I don't want to unnecessarily make this video more complex than it already is. But our pagination method can be a page number or can be an offset. WordPress REST API is using the page number. Which parameter is it? In our case, it's called page. And then we need the path to the total items. So this count we need in order to make sure that we can calculate the number of pages within the pagination. For WordPress, it's going to be this XWP total pages within the header. We also mention all of this in the Academy, right? If you want to, if you need a reference, just definitely make sure to check out the Academy article. All right, with everything in place here, on the right-hand side, we can now see our full response. Maybe make a change here. Let's just say we do change the post per page to 5. Let's fetch the data again by clicking that button. And now instead of 3, you can see we see the latest 5 results. Let's save it and maybe have a look at the front end. Let's reload. And now you can see we see 5 instead of 3 results. And of course, the pagination count changes as well. Okay, so how do we actually render the data within our query loop? Like I said before, this is done through dynamic data tags or custom dynamic data tags using the new query underscore API dynamic data tag. Now, you don't need to remember how to manually type this out. You can just simply inspect the data, either using this tree view, or if you want to see the raw JSON, you can do it here as well. But if you want to copy this dynamic data tag, it's better using tree view. So let's just open up the first result. And let's just say we want to render the title, right? How do we do this? We just simply hover over whatever we want to output. And then we see 2 icons here. The first one is the clipboard. The second one is the plus icon. We just want to copy the dynamic data tag to our clipboard. And then we can just go to the element where we want to render the tag and just paste it in. So let's just copy it. And you can see here, query underscore API with the add key and then the link and then rendered nested array or nested object data set. So I can just click on heading. Let's just clear this out because we have it within the clipboard. So I can just hit Command V because I'm a Mac. And then I now have my dynamic data tag here, which says query API, and then this add key, which is new. And what do we want to output? We want to put out the title, and within the title, we want to output the render title. So that shows us now our title, right? Second example is going to be the link. That's not nested in any way, so we just simply say query API add key and then link. But let's just maybe open the query up again to just show you another example. Let's just say I want to output the status, right? And I want to actually create a custom dynamic data tag here. I don't want to have to copy this, maybe because I want to use it a couple of times within this loop. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a custom dynamic data tag. So I just hit the plus icon here. And then I can give it a shortcut name. So I'm just going to say post status, right? And hit on create. And now I can see I have 2 dynamic data tags. The link I already created before this video. And the second one is going to be the post status. So what I can do now, I can just simply, I'm going to actually add a new element here. It's going to be basic text. And this one is going to contain the post status. And now I can retrieve the dynamic data tag that we just generated, like any other dynamic data tag, from the dropdown. And at the very top, we can see a query API and then pages on Bricks.io, because that's how I named my API call. And this is just the ID of it. And now I have the page link and the post status. The post status is the one that we just created. So I just click here. And now it says query API add key status. And then I can see the status here. They all have the same status, publish, right? But yeah, this is how easy it is to actually retrieve the data, right? Hit save, go to the front end, and now I can see post status publish, right? Yeah, I think that's everything in terms of how our first query works here. Let's just quickly jump to the second one to have a look on how this one is rendered, because it's set up a little bit differently. Let's again click on the block that contains the query loop. We're gonna click on the API icon. We open up our settings, and here we can see our different setup. This one, I call it dummy recipes, and then I'm gonna specify the URL, which is this one. It's also a GET call. It doesn't require any authorization or custom headers. I'm gonna limit the results here through the URL parameters to 5. Again, you have to consult the documentation of your API provider. For dummy.json, dummyjson.com, it's called limit, and then I set it to 5, so I can see the last 5 recipes, right? Now, here I have a response path defined, because you can see the full response actually gives me all of this information here. And what do we want? We actually want our recipes. So what I need to define here is just simply recipes, right? And then within here, that's what we can loop over, which was not necessary in the REST API, but the way this response is structured, which also contains the total, skip, and limit, we're gonna make sure that we need to drill into the recipes. And yeah, you can see at the very top here, the response that we see here is for this custom path called recipes, and this is what the query loop is gonna consume within Bricks. Cache duration, we don't change anything here. We also enable pagination, and here it's different. The pagination method here is actually using an offset. Yeah, you figured it out by reading the documentation of the API provider. The parameter here for this dummyjson.com is using the skip parameter. The offset key is called limit, and the total items, we actually get it from, it's within the total, under total. So you can see here, we define data.total. This is the total that we need, right? So data just accesses the root, and then dot total to access the number within, that's under total here. And with everything set up here, we can fetch the data. Let me just maybe change the limit here so you can see how this changes. Fetch again, right? Let's save it. Let's have a look at the front end. Let's reload. And now instead of 5, I see the last 3 results. Pagination is set up, which we also can have a quick look at. It's pretty simple. It's just a pagination element. I'm going to select the query. In my case, is this dummy JSON query. And I've enabled HX pagination here. And this is how I can query that one. And yeah, so I think that covers both examples. Like I said, depending on which API endpoint you're hitting, definitely make sure to study the documentation first, set everything up according to documentation, and you should be able to start querying any external API that you want. All right, I hope you enjoyed this new feature. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to our support. And yeah, we look forward to you start using that feature. Until next one, bye-bye.